Hi.
How are you?
Oh, I'm good. It's so good to see you. How's my camera angles? That work?
Oh, it's great. How's your quarantine been?
So I got three generations living under one roof.
Yeah.
I have my parents here, and I have my two kids, my two college-age kids. So we got 19 to 86
Wow.
living under one roof. It's a little bit of a social experiment, but we do what we do, and we keep it moving.
Yeah.
Everybody's healthy, so I'm grateful for that.
You brought your parents from Puerto Rico. They had just moved there, and then the earthquake happened, and then you brought them here, and that's where they've been since.
It has been crazy. It has been crazy. I mean, there's two different sort of dynamics. One is like these amazing moments that you get to create with three generations that you never would have otherwise had. And living in the moment and recognizing that, I think, is really important. And then there's these other moments where it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're all here right now. But we're doing okay. How about you? How are you?
I'm fine. It's been quite a journey, but we're doing the best we can. I think that's all we can really do right now.
That's right. That's true. That's all we can do. And I think there's also been an interesting thing that's come out in terms of like how we come together and how we support each other, right? During these times. I think it's exposed people's humanity for better or for worse in most instances.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are here to raise some money for your campaign.
Let's do this.
Everyone, if you don't know Dianne Morales, she is a champion for LGBTQ plus rights. She was one of the marshals for the Queer March a few weeks ago.
With my daughter.
With your daughter. She is a single mother. She is Afro-Latina, and she is a champion for minorities in New York. She's a champion for low-income families and people in New York.
And I'm glad you found me. I'm glad we found each other. I've been working in the community my entire life, my entire career, like I say, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder with people on the ground doing the work and trying to make change and trying to help, traditionally oppressed communities really overcome and access opportunity. And that came from my own experience. I'm a first generation Black Boricua, born and raised here in New York. But, as I got access to elite educational institutions, I became aware that there were fewer and fewer kids that looked like me, right? And after a while, you start to go, well, what's going on here? I made a decision that I wanted to figure that out and that I wanted to try to level the playing field. I mean, little did I know that throughout the course of my life, I would then end up, as a single mom. I have, both of my kids have learning differences, so I had to struggle with all of that. And I've been the CEO of anti-poverty organizations and of The Door, which is how I sort of first really, I think that was probably like my real formal introduction to the LGBT community. And I wanted to create programming for young people, homeless youth, runaway and homeless youth that were hanging out on the piers, right? That was when I decided we started hosting ball competitions and Kikis and stuff like that, just to sort of create a space for the community where young people could come in and feel like they were bringing their whole selves and being exactly who they wanted to be in that space, and be safe. I love people, and I have a thing about, communities that have been oppressed and marginalized and victimized. And there is as much as we might be different, there's a commonality in those shared experiences, right? When Trump got elected, I got fired up and wanted to do something different and wanted to figure out how to use my skills and my experience in a different way to bring larger scale change to the communities that need it the most. I never thought I'd be running for office, but people have been telling me that for years. I started to sort of, okay, what would that look like? And what would that be? And the more I sort of let myself have that conversation, the more it was like, well, why not? Why not one of us, right?
Yeah.
Why not you? Why do we buy into the mentality that that's not for us? And so I'm so excited about having the chance to be a voice for those communities, for our communities, and to really be bold and unapologetic about creating the change that we deserve.
You said go big or go home.
That's right.
And I think for your campaign to be the first female mayor of New York City, to be the first Latina mayor of New York City, I think there's so many people that look to you and see an incredible beacon of hope for what they can be and what they can aspire to be. I think you have an incredible progressive platform that I really love so dearly. And I think especially today, you have to care about the people you are running to represent. I've really seen just how much you care about the people.
Thank you. It's true, and it's easy for me, and it's genuine. I don't have to fake it, because this is the work that I've done all my life. So the love is there. No one gets into this kind of work for for the fame and glory. There's no money. There's very rarely even sort of appreciation. You do it because you love it, and because it's kind of in your DNA. And this race is, I mean, it's so untraditional, and it's so, for me to kind of be doing this, right? There's so many messages out there about like, it's not for you. There's a lot of erasure that happens in the media when they talk about the mayoral race. They'll list all of these candidates that are declared, and then they'll list some people that are thinking about it and not acknowledge my candidacy. So there's a lot of forces that I feel like conspire to make you feel like it's not for you. But my inspiration comes from the people that I'm hoping to represent. And the idea of representing something for folks and providing a symbol, of what's possible for communities that haven't had that, like, I'm here for it. That's that to me is so worth it. And having people recognize me and be like, oh my God, thank you so much. It's so amazing to see myself in you in some way. Yeah. We need more of that. And we need more of us in those positions to make decisions for us, right?
Yeah.
So, nothing about us without us.
We've had white man after white man after white man after white man be mayor of our. And I think your candidacy represents, for so many people, just how important that you being the mayor would be and how you would represent all of us.
The career politicians who are running in this race have millions of dollars saved. And that's because they've been going from one office to another, and they save their money and they bring it with them, and they keep raising money while they're in office, right? They leverage that current platform to keep raising money for the next race. And so much of this is about getting my name out there. So thank you very much, right? The name recognition, people understanding that I'm in the race, people understanding what I stand for. And the fact that I am deliberately in this race to bring voice to and represent all of these communities who have historically not been part of this process. So, this is really about building a movement, right? And we're living at a really unique moment in time and in history. When you think about the COVID pandemic, when you think about the exposure of the racism pandemic, the way it's been exposed over the last couple of months, and this like extraordinary diverse coalition of voices that has come together across social and economic lines to say enough. We have an opportunity here to really sort of rewrite the rule book, right? But it means we have to build a movement. We need a critical mass of people to sign on to this idea of, you know what, we're not going back. We're not going to do things the way we used to. We're not going to forget. Mm-hmm. We're not going to slip back into the old ways. We've had enough. And the way that we do that is by building the voices one at a time. And eventually we will be louder than those folks that have millions of dollars. There will be more of us. I'm okay with $10 contributions, because if we can, if that makes my campaign more accessible to the average New Yorker, then that's the whole point. And I want people to feel like they're a part of this, like they own a part of this movement, because I'm not doing this alone, and I'm not doing it just for me. This is so much bigger than me. And so we have a chance to do something together that's powerful and make history. And that's what I'm here for.
Just the thought of what your administration as mayor would be, it just excites me so much. And again, going back to the vote for the recent budget that passed in New York City, completely gutted that the New York City Council, that Speaker Johnson did not commit to defunding $1 billion from the police. And I believe that you are completely for defunding the police.
Yeah, so I was actually the first mayoral candidate to sign on to the idea of defunding the police by $1 billion. The police have got to be out of schools. That's the very bare minimum as far as I'm concerned. Police officers have never made my children feel safe at school. And if you think about converting those dollars to mental health supports, to, you know, youth development supports, to all kinds of different resources that schools need. It's not like our schools are flush and, you know, have everything else they need. That's problem number one. The other thing is when you think about police, you know, and 911 calls, 311 calls, and what police are responding to, 90% of the calls that they're responding to are mental health, are substance abuse, are homeless issues. That's not their lane. That's not what they're trained for. And you certainly don't need a gun to respond to any of those things. So if we took those dollars and redirected them towards, you know, a whole different unit or division of first responders that were actually trained in addressing those issues, that's real public safety. Policing does not equal public safety. If you want to create safety for the public, then you have to give the public what they need. You have to address their needs, their basic human needs, and everything that allows them to live in dignity. That's where you start. Sorry, I can just, you know, this gets me fired up because I've, you know, my kids have been subjected to, you know, police profiling and brutality, essentially. My kids, they were both pepper sprayed at a protest on May 29th. My son's been racially profiled on the corner of my house. Like, you know, police officers stopping him, like, where are you going? What are you doing? He lives here. Enough with that. The system was not actually created to protect everyone.
The system is working just as it was in.
Exactly. It's kind of like the epitome of racism, right? Like racism exists in all of our institutions. It is part of you know, for better or for worse, it's part of the foundation and the core of this country. But it is like epitomized in the policing system, right? When you think back to the slave patrols. And so I think that we need to actually start over. And we need to start over with the premise of what do our communities need to be safe. When you think about that, it actually touches on so many other things. It touches on our schools. It touches on our mental health system. It touches on housing. It touches on substance abuse. It's like, it is everywhere, right? When you, I think tackling the policing issue would just make such a huge difference across the board because they've got tentacles in so many other of our institutions. That's a big one. And our communities need to be part of that conversation. They need to be at the table because we know what we want and we know what we need. And you know, the idea that the budget went down the way that it did, despite so many people being out there every day for weeks saying what they needed and what they wanted, just goes, you know, further to reflect the point that they're not representing the community.
I want to support someone who will listen to me.
That's
and
right.
If the mayor and if Corey Johnson and if the council had all voted not to pass the budget, they would have had my ear. It just goes back to the fact that our politicians that we have in office now are not listening to constituents.
That's right. I think that's spot on. I also think, you know, we don't know who politicians are indebted to, especially career politicians, right? Folks who've been doing this forever. And there's a part of me that feels like if there is this much of an uprising in the city and there's this much consensus around doing something and our elected officials still don't do it, like what else is going on there, right? They're not feeling like they're accountable to us. Who are they being accountable to? I mean, democracy is supposed to belong to all of us equally. That's the whole point. And if we're not using it as a tool to leverage and to bring to the table those voices that have been historically marginalized, then we're doing something wrong. It's time for all of this to change. It's time for who represents us to change, what they look like, where they come from, what their backgrounds are. And it's time for the whole policing system to change. It's time. It's time. You know, we need to activate and mobilize, not just to elect new leaders, but once they're in office, to keep their feet to the fire. A movement is not just something that ends once you sort of get this one thing. You got to keep it. You got to sustain it. And that's harder, of course. And I don't, you know, I feel that way about myself even. Great, let's get me elected. I don't want you all to leave me alone once that happens. I want you to stay with me, right? Because if we have an agenda that we want to execute on, I'm going to need all of us. It's going to take all of us. And it's not just, it's going to have to last long beyond Election Day.
And I think, again, we've seen that with the Black Lives Matter movement and calling having petitions to call for officers to be fired, for them to be held accountable. I think we've seen how much our voices can really matter in these cases, and how it's not just about an election, it's about consequences for people's actions, and how we can't be complacent. One of my biggest political inspirations has always been Shirley Chisholm.
Oh, yeah.
A quote of hers that comes to mind in what you said earlier is, if they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring a folding chair. You represent so many people that haven't seen themselves in the highest office in New York City, and how your candidacy, and if you win your run as mayor, would mean so much to so many people.
I'm a single mom. I'm a single mom of color. I've been paid less. I've been looked down upon. I've struggled with childcare and you know, all those kinds of issues. I understand, though, that when I do well, the first thing I do is to take care of my family and my community, right? So when women do better, we all do better, because women are our caretakers, they're our providers. And so I feel really strongly about strengthening the social, economic, and political position of women in the city as well.
And I really appreciate you so much for doing all you've done for so many marginalized communities over the years. Who is your biggest political inspiration?
It's Martin Luther King. I call my team Loving Disruptors. And that is inspired by a speech that Martin Luther King gave, where he talked about the idea of the civil rights movement and how the civil rights movement was criticizing this country and government and those kinds of things. And he talked about how you can't really do that if you don't care, right? If you don't care about it being better. So for me, when I think about my campaign, what we stand for, and the people, you know, that are sort of supporting me and kind of rallying behind my message, it's because we actually love community. We love people. We love this country. We love New York City. And because we love it so much, we have high expectations. When you love your family member, you hold them up to a really high standard. You want the best for them, and you're going to push them, and you're going to let them know when they're slipping. And so that's the premise and the foundation of my candidacy. I love New York City, and I also see the ugly underbelly and want us to be better. And for me, it's definitely at the core of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
I truly adore you, Dianne.
Thank you.
The more I look into you, the more I know about you, it just keeps confirming that I am making the right choice by supporting your team.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for lifting my candidacy and my campaign in the way that you have already. It feels like you feel like family. I'll just say one thing about bringing that folding chair to the table. My folding chair is big enough for all of us. It has room for everyone. It has room for everyone who has historically not been given a seat at the table. Let's do this. Let's bring that let's carry that folding chair and make it happen. Let's roar, let's be loud, and let's be unapologetic.
Let's do it together, Dianne.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Thank you so much.
Mwah.